right, back for episode 4 of Hidden Gems in Scripture, and we are going to finish up the final plagues with this video. So it's taking me 3 to get through them, but there's just so much cool stuff there. So, continuing with the plagues of Egypt, what we have seen throughout all these is just how specific and detailed God truly is through what he does and intentional of dismantling Egypt and their worldview. And so, one by one, he's just dismantling the gods and goddesses of the Egyptian worldview and just flipping and reversing everything that they've known to show that he is beyond all comparison as God, the creator of everything. And so we pick up with plague number 7, and God's about to crank it up a notch with this one. And God lets Pharaoh know that he could have just completely decimated Egypt and freed his people if he wanted to, but he has at some level restrained his hand, and he's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse, and it's going to get worse for Egypt. And so this time he tells Moses to stretch his hand toward the sky, and that thunder and hail and fire are all going to come down to the earth onto Egypt. It says that the fire was flashing continually in the midst of the hail and was very heavy, so heavy that in Exodus 9:25 it says that even the trees were shattered in the field. I mean, this had to have been terrifying. How heavy does hail have to be to shatter a tree? So I did a little bit of research. 1 inch hail can damage things pretty badly. 2 to 4 inch hail can cause major structural damage and can fall much faster, up to 70 miles an hour. 2 to 4 inch hail can fall. And then what I found was, according to the U.S. National Weather Service, they have clocked hail coming in at about 107 miles an hour is the fastest they've measured it in the U.S. And the largest hailstone in the U.S. on record was in South Dakota. I can't remember when it was, but measured at 8 inches across, weighing at almost 2 pounds. One piece of hail. Now imagine a hailstorm that looked like this, with all of them being that big around, like tiny, like small bowling balls. Imagine that coming down, 2 pounds, hitting things, shattering trees, coming in at faster than a Major League Baseball pitcher would throw a baseball. And so, how does this challenge the gods of Egypt? So, Nut was the sky goddess, usually depicted as a woman arched over the earth, forming like a vaulted dome over it. And according to the Egyptians, she protected the earth and stabilized the sky. So you can see pretty quickly how this might challenge Nut and her alleged domain. So Shu was another god associated with the skies and the atmosphere, and Shu was responsible for sort of maintaining the air, the wind, and the space between the earth and the sky. So Plague 7 totally reverses Egypt's expectation on order in the sky, and God shows himself to be unmatched to any of their gods. And so their gods and goddesses couldn't do anything to stop the hand of the Lord. And so with that, we're going to move on to plague number 8. And the last plague really devastated Egypt, and this is going to continue to pile on what God has already done. And so with this next plague we see is the plague of locust, plague number 8. And that comes after Egypt has just been devastated. And so this plague is going to basically finish off anything that was left of their crops, anything that could survive the hail and the fire and the thunderstorms. And so in Exodus 10 verse 15, it actually says that there were so many locusts that they basically darkened the land and nothing green was left in Egypt. That's how many locusts showed up. And so what god does this challenge specifically? They had a god named Set, and it's spelled Seth, but it's pronounced Set, I believe. The god of chaos, and in some Egyptian tradition, he was also known as very powerful yet unstable. And so, for whatever reason, being the god of chaos, they believed that he could also calm or control chaos that was happening. And so, this majorly undercuts Set because the massive amount of chaos that they've endured through this whole thing. And this is like just an additional layer to pile on top of what he should have already stopped by now. And so now, however, the last of their crops and their vegetation are completely gone. And so we've got 2 plagues left. So we move on to number 9. And this is actually sort of the climax of the plagues, even though there's 10, and I'll explain why. we're getting to the big guns in Egypt. And so this last one challenges Ra, which is basically their chief deity, the sun god. And so this plague is going to cover the land in darkness for 3 days. And what's amazing about this plague, similar to a lot of the other ones with Israel, is that in Goshen, and the Israelites still had light. And so once again, they're unaffected by this plague. And so this is their chief deity that's left here. And he's left completely powerless because we see this sort of climax of this final plague, this plague number 9, because the final plague, number 10, is going to go after directly Pharaoh himself. And so that's a challenge against Pharaoh. And the final plague goes against him. And obviously, the sun being darkened for 3 days challenges Ra pretty. It's pretty self-explanatory. But this last plague, plague number 10, goes against Pharaoh specifically because he continues to harden his heart. And this last plague is the killing of the firstborn sons in the land. And so in Egyptian culture, the reason this directly undercuts Pharaoh now is that they believed that the pharaohs were divine and essentially the embodiment of the god Horus, that we talked about back in Plague 6. And so each living pharaoh, they were believed to be Horus incarnate, I guess, basically representing divine kingship and order, and that was the lineage of the gods. And so, all that to say that the line of Pharaoh was considered divine. So, the fact that this final plague goes after the firstborn sons is God putting on display that the entire order of their divine order and lineage is just completely undercut by God. And so, nothing they could do could stop God from putting his power on full display as he dismantles each of their gods and challenges their very domains. And so, in closing, we see these plagues in Exodus 12:12. The verses, God actually states it very plainly when he says, "Against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgments. I am Yahweh." And so we see him right there just say that he's going against all their gods, and that's exactly what he's been doing through all these plagues. And so God is the God beyond all comparison. There's no other God that can measure up to Yahweh, the creator of all things. And there is your final hidden gem through the plagues of Egypt. And I've got a whole folder of fire content dropping soon, so follow for more.